Now that we've reviewed multiplying fractions, let's move on to dividing fractions. So the method that I always use, I call it the keep, change, flip. So I'm going to keep the first, I'm going to change to multiplication, and then I flip, so I flip the second. And what happens when you change to multiplication, you end up multiplying what's known as the inverse. So an example, if you had 2/3, we would say its inverse is 3/2. So what happens is the numerator becomes your denominator and denominator becomes your numerator. So one more example, if I had like 5/8, I could say that its inverse would be like me having 8/5. So you'll notice it's like I take this fraction and I just flip it over. Example 1, you have a whole number by a fraction, and I'm just saying the fraction could be improper or proper. So it tells you divide each of the following. What you'll notice too, I've added some color coding up here. So as I go through the solution, I'm going to highlight like which part was my keep, where I did the change, and then where I did the flip. So when I have 1/5, which is proper fraction, divided by 3, which is a whole number, I find a lot of students prefer to just take a second, rewrite it. So that's like 1/5 divided by 3/1. Again, if you don't need to do this stuff, that's totally fine. Okay, so my process tells you to keep the first. So 1/5 stays the same. Okay, so this was my keep part. Then it tells me to change to multiplication. So I'm going to change that to multiplication. So this symbol has to become a multiplication symbol. You can also use a dot if you want. And then the last part, I have to flip the second. So if I look at the question, originally I had 3/1. I'm going to flip it. It's going to become 1/3. All right. And then once you get here, so I'll kind of put a little red rectangle around it. This is exactly what we just practiced for the last 2 days for the review, right? So I have fraction times fraction. I will go top times top. So I would get 1 over bottom times bottom. I would get 15. Double check, can you simplify it? The answer is no. So then this would be our final answer. Let's try one more. So this time you'll notice the whole numbers first, the fraction second. Same idea. So this would be like 5 divided by 1/2. I could write this as 5/1 divided by 1/2. All right, I am going to keep the first. So I'm going to keep the 5/1. I'm going to change this to multiplication. So your sign has to change. And then I have to flip the second. So I'm going to flip this to 2/1. Okay, I will point out, once you get here, you've already practiced this. So we're going to go top times top. I'm going to get 10. And then bottom times bottom, you will get 1. We can clean this up. We wouldn't normally write a number like that. It's like 10 divided by 1 or 10/1. So we're going to say our final answer would be 10. Moving on to example 2. So these questions would be fraction times fraction. Again, could be improper, could be proper. So question A is 4/5. So I have a proper fraction divided by another proper fraction. Now you'll notice this time I don't need to rewrite either of these, so I can jump right into my steps. So I keep the first, I change to multiplication, and then I have to flip the second. All right, well then, this is just basic multiplying fractions, top times top. I will get 12, bottom times bottom, I will get 10. I'm going to check if I can reduce that down. I can. That would be like having 6/5. And then based on the question didn't have any mixed numbers. So if you want, you could leave this as an improper fraction, or you could say that's like you having 1 and 1/5. Okay, it just depends what the question is asking you for. Question B, this time I have a proper fraction divided by improper. I don't need to change either of these fractions, so I will go straight to dividing them. So I'm going to keep the first, change to multiplication, flip the second, so it becomes 2/5. All right, and now that's multiplication. I know I can go top times top to get 16. Bottom times bottom will give me 50. I'm going to check if I could simplify that down. So I for sure could divide that by 2. So So I could break this down into 8/25ths, and that's as small as I can get it. So I would just state that as my final answer. Example 3, now we're going to throw in mixed numbers. Not a big deal. You will notice way back up here, I did mention, so if it's written as a mixed number, you want to change to improper fraction first. So the same thing we did when we were doing multiplication. All right, so question A, I have 2 5/8 divided by 2/6. So I'm going to first changing this to a mixed number. So that's like 8 times 2 is 16, add the 5. That would be like 21/8. Okay, and then still divided by 2/6. All right, go into the division. I'm going to keep the first. So 21/8. I'm going to change this to multiplication. As soon as I do that, though, I have to then flip this because I have to multiply by the inverse. So that becomes 6/2. Now we multiply 21 times 6, you should get 126 divided by 18. Now we just multiply. 21 times 6 will be 126 divided by 8 times 2 will give you 16. We can reduce this down. I can divide top and bottom by 2 to get 63/8. And then it did start with a mixed number as part of your question. So most likely you'd probably want to state your answer as a mixed number. So as improper, it's 63/8. Or I could say that is like you having 7 and 7/8. Question B, we have 1/2 divided by 1 1/2. So this time I'm going to start by changing the second part into improper. So this is like me saying I have 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1. That's like 3/2. So 1/2 by 3/2. Okay, I'm going to keep the first, change to multiplication, flip the second, and then I go top times top. So I will get 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 3 is 6. I'm going to simplify that down, and I would get a final answer of 1/3. Last question. So this time I have 2 mixed numbers, not a big deal. We're going to switch them both. I'm going to move over here this time to give a little bit of more room. So 5 times 9 is 45. If you add 2 to that, that's like 47/5. And then 1 and 1/3, that would be like having 3 times 1 is 3. If I add 1, that's like having 4/3. Right? So all I did, change mixed number to improper, mixed number to improper. Now I'm going to actually divide them. So I keep the first, 47/5. I changed multiplication, and then I have to flip the second. So that becomes 3/4. Multiply top times top, you will get 141/20. Check if you could simplify that down. Okay, we can't simplify it, but we could change it to a mixed number and say this would be like having 7 and 1/20. All right, now time for you to do some more practice on your own. There's going to be 2 worksheets. Again, they're split up. So the first one is whole numbers and fractions. This time, change it up. Why don't you try the evens? So you're really only doing half of the numbers that are on the sheet. And then the second worksheet is just on mixed numbers. And again, try the evens. If you find you need extra practice or you want that extra practice, go ahead, complete all the questions. But if you completed half of each sheet, then that would probably be enough for you to figure out how you're feeling with dividing fractions. And again, let me know. Do you feel like you are a happy face, got this, neutral face, not quite sure, might need a bit of practice, or the sad face, that means that you need some additional support. Other than that, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.